Creating from the Heart, the Artistry of Living. I'm Suzy Vance, and I'm here with artist Bonnie Zimmer. Such a treat.
Hi, Suzy. It's such a treat to have you here in my home studio.
So, Bonnie, long time ago, did you ever imagine you would be doing what you're doing today?
Well, I don't think I had the foresight to even think about what I would be doing down the road, but what I'm doing today is completely informed by what I did as a child.
Well, talk to me about that.
I grew up in northern Jasper County, outside of Wheatfield, Indiana, about 30 minutes from where I currently live. And my sister and I would play for hours on end in our pine grove and outdoors, raking up pine needles and moving sticks around to do floor plans and houses. And so
I did that
that
too.
time in nature somehow just seeped into my soul. Then a couple of other pivotal experiences. When I was, I think, in second or third grade, my mom gave me a Barbie knitting kit tube. And of course, she didn't know how to knit, but my Aunt Shanna did. So she showed me how to knit. And so I didn't really like Barbie, but I really liked making
Knitting.
clothes and knitting. And so I knit little awkward squares for Barbie. Also around that same time, my grandparents lived downstairs in our house. My mom and dad and my three siblings and I lived upstairs. Well, Grandma Ollie had a treadle sewing machine. And so she let me fool around on that. And so I learned how to sew some straight stitches. So in like fourth and fifth grade, I was making Barbie clothes, knitting and sewing. And then in sixth grade, I was fortunate enough to have a fabulous home ec teacher. We had home ec, and I learned sewing. And she taught us how to read a pattern, how to sew. And the most important thing I learned at that early age was how to rip it out if it wasn't right. And so by the time I was in the eighth grade, I was sewing clothes for 4-H. I made a coat, made all my clothes in high school. So my art form, my earliest art form, but love of textiles, started then too, was in high school with sewing.
How did you morph into, what triggered the outside besides your early?
Well, I just always loved nature and lived growing up on a farm. Just the outdoors was part of who I was and where I lived. And I was also fortunate enough, I went to a tiny little high school. And so, of course, I wanted to start college and get the heck out of town the minute I could. And so I started college at IU Bloomington in the summer of 1969, 3 weeks out of high school. And so I was wandering around campus and knew that I wanted to take art classes. Actually, I should probably back up. My mother was the high school art teacher when I was in high school. And so I stayed as far away from art classes as I could. I actually thought I would be a PE major because I was physically active, but it was pre-Title IX, so we had no women's sports. So I was a cheerleader and a drum majorette and a pom-pom person. That was the only physical activity. But the last semester of my high school, my senior year, I'm like, oh, geez, I'll take art just because I really like making stuff. Well, a week into my art classes with my mom, I knew that I loved art and I would major in art in college. But she was always up my business, so it was just like I wanted to be as far away from her as I could.
But anyway,
I figured out in high school, it's art for me. And so, as I said, I went to Bloomington 3 weeks out of high school and was wandering around the fine arts building before classes started. And I wandered into this room on the second floor, and it was filled with giant floor looms. And it kind of took my breath away, and I walked in, and then I turned around 180, and the entire back wall was solid cones and spools of yarn from floor to ceiling in every color, texture in the world. And I could hear the angels literally break out in song with a la. And
we're here for you.
Yep. And I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. And so I was able to get my foundation courses in that summer and able to take weaving right out of the gate. So starting in the summer, I was almost 2 years ahead of some of my peers in getting foundation classes out of the way and getting in classes. I had 7 semesters of constructed textiles as an undergraduate student. So I got the first BFA that IU awarded in 1973, and I loved it. There was nothing I would rather do than climb in a great big floor loom with a 20 ends per inch warp and sit there for hours on end meditating and doing it.
Yes. And now?
Well, right out of the gate also, as I was weaving, and I had a marvelous instructor, Bud Stallnecker, who was very, very technically oriented, such an interesting character, but we did fabulous assignments and notebooks, and I learned all sorts of fabulous technical things. But immediately I realized that I was trying to get this flat grid-like cloth to become organic three-dimensional forms right away. And so my first major wall hanging was a double layer stuffed piece, organic shapes that I had sewed hundreds of ends back in to get this organic edge on it. And so that nature just came out immediately. And so everything I made always had an organic flavor to
Yes.
it. And we also had a woman come to IU who had gone to Berkeley and studied with a man named Ed Rosbach, who was the father of contemporary basketry. He had been a soldier in World War II and on the Aleutian Islands came across some of the baling baskets, which inspired in him how to research it. And so he is the one that brought the idea of baskets to the forefront, and then baskets as a conceptual art form.
Right.
And Joanne Sterenberg, my other professor, did a master's with him, and so she brought conceptual basketry to IU. So I had this beautiful technical background in loom weaving as well as learned about basketry. And so from the get-go, I was making three-dimensional weavings, and I knew that basketry was going to be my direction, and I'm still doing them to this day.
I love this.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
So, I was very fortunate to be at the right place at the right time and just find things that just clicked.
Yes.
So,
you know, it's very interesting because I think it's Julia Cameron who has this
the artist way.
The artist way, and how you just, it speaks to you. The universe does. And it sort of taps on your shoulder, and you can listen or you cannot.
Yeah.
And listening is so important.
Yeah,
it's
I have to shut up and get out of my own way a lot of the time.
Put your toe in the water.
Yes.
Go ahead, do it.
No,
and
you're
you
absolutely
did.
right.
You did. You went with it.
Well, and the materials, for the last several decades, I've been working with natural materials literally under my feet out in my yard. Milkweeds are my latest real passion. That I've been trying to work with for probably 15 years. And of course, 2 or 3 years in, they would naturally deteriorate and go back to the earth. But I found, I don't like to put chemicals on natural materials, but I found this fabulous medium that I am coating milkweeds with, and I think it is going to make them archivally stable and sound. And so I'm stitching into them and stitching them together into vessel forms now.
Can I turn around and bring this over here? Hold
if you
on.
grab it by the thicker blonde sticks.
Hang on.
Curly willow is another of my favorite linear forms, and so I've got a couple curly willow trees.
Hold this for a minute.
I have a couple curly willow trees out in the yard that I've been tapping for a long time. So this is my most recent piece that I just completed, inspired by Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass book, and the idea of humans and nature needing each other and working and living in reciprocity. So I'll hold it for you. So these are the milkweeds that were coated, and they are this beautiful honey golden color. And if the light hits it just right, they almost look like they've been gold leafed, which I think is kind of something from the angels too. And then you'll see several found objects. And I like the found objects to stand in for humans. And I like to put the copper netting,
Tell me about this.
The copper netting is a technique. I learned knotless netting at IU in one of our little mini assignments, but for me, it taps into Native American dream catcher spirit as well. And so for me, these pieces are also places for dreams to come in and flow out and
I
work
want
together.
you to
I'll show the
tell
bottom.
me.
So then the bottom, it's sort of like,
Oh, yes.
sometimes I don't even put bottoms in them because...
So now tell me about these.
Well, my dad
These.
was a farmer, worked in the steel mills and was a farmer, but we had various chickens and guinea fowl. And so when I put the guinea feathers in, they're a little nod to my dad and his guineas. Plus, I just think, you need that little bit of visual texture of those polka dots, and who doesn't love black and white? And, there are 3 or 4 layers going on with those guinea feathers. So, yeah, I don't know if it'll stand. Okay.
Wonderful. This is a life unfolding, always.
Well, I appreciate having the opportunity to share it with you.
So if someone appeared in your life and they were stuck, just stuck, not happy in their job, not happy in relationships, what would you tell them to do to get unstuck?
That's a great question. I did teach for 40 years, and so I had lots of encounters with students who were often stuck or couldn't find a direction.
Or didn't believe that they had whatever the skill was to do the project.
Yes. When people find out that I'm an art teacher, they'll say, oh, I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. I don't have any art talent. And I would always say, wait, I don't think you had the right art person to work with you, because everybody has something to say and something that they are interested in, that they can connect with. So to answer your question, I would ask them to think about if they've seen other people or other works of art, or what I had heard referred to as a metaphysical model. I had a chance to take a wonderful workshop with a textile artist from Wisconsin named Walter Nottingham in the mid-'80s at Aramont School of Crafts. And the class was called Finding One's Way in Art, because I was stuck at that time. And so Walter ran us through a number of different exercises. And so one exercise that was so valuable was to find your metaphysical model. Look to other artists or look to other people who are living their lives or making things that when you see it, it just grabs your heart. In fact, we've all been to an art museum or an art fair and seen something that someone else made that you're just like, oh, I could have made that, or I should have made that, or that looks like something I would have made. And so
I want to make it.
I want to make that. There's a bit of envy there, but yet this great admiration. And so when you find a nugget like that, the point is to sit down and really, really look at it, really think about it, really listen to what the universe is telling you, figure out, why do I love this so much?
Right.
And it might just be something that reminds you of your childhood, or a favorite color that reminds you of your grandma's sweater or something. I don't know. But consciously becoming aware of these nuggets that appeal to you and figuring out, what is it that I like and why do I like this?
And could then, I put my little toe in the water somehow?
And then taking that small nugget and playing with it yourself. And so, like, if you're a maker, as my students were, I would often say to them, I have 2 questions for you at any given time that I want you to be able to answer. What are you doing? And why are you doing this? And it can be as simple as, I'm just fooling around with these acrylic paints because I want to see what they'll do.
Right. Or I like this color.
Yes. Right. Sometimes people don't even know what they're doing or why they're doing it.
Thank you.
If you can answer those 2 questions.
And that's a good thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do a lot of fooling around with stuff, but giving yourself permission, also finding the confidence. I find so many people I encounter who don't have a background, who don't feel confident.
Who say,
I
can't do that. I can't do that.
And so,
who says you can't do that?
Even to this day, if I'm teaching just a simple one-day workshop, talking someone into, come on and take this workshop. Of course, as an instructor, your job is to find a project that's inherently successful, that they can do and have some degree of success, but yet put their own stamp on it. But anyway, that was pretty rambling of an answer.
No, that's good. That's good. That's really...
Just look, if you can't figure out what you want to do, look at somebody else who's doing it, and then figure out, how can I maybe pursue this path, but in my own way.
Yes.
So
exactly. And the other thing that I think is interesting is the use of volunteer activities. If you're stuck, just one of the things to do is to find something you like to do. And one of the ways to do that is, you never know who you're going to meet if you volunteer to do something that might change your life.
I love that. Yes, volunteerism is so important. Yeah. Giving to someone else, and just the joy of having someone else be happier or benefit from what you've done.
Happy.
Yes, it's a great confidence builder for you too.
Yeah.
That's a hugely important point.
It is.
Yeah, to mention that the Prairie Arts Council, which is a little art council here in Rensselaer, I was one of the founding members of that. We had our 30th anniversary last year, and it's something that I've done for 30 years. I've been on the board. I just found out like last year that you could get off the board. I didn't know that was an option. They didn't tell me that. But
I bet they didn't.
I have helped to work on everything from doing an art camp with visual art workshops to our gallery. We have a 12-month-a-year gallery called the Lillian Fendig Gallery that I am currently now the volunteer director of that again. And operative here is volunteer because it's not a paid position, but oh, I love it so much, and I get so much joy. And we showcase student work to professional work to emerging people, and again, that volunteer aspect of it is a hugely important part of filling out my whole being.
Pass it on.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. This has been fabulous. And if somebody wants to see your work, where do they look?
I actually have a website, bonniezimmer.com. So BONNIEZIMMER, bonniezimmer.com.
Great.
So,
and they can contact you through that?
Absolutely. I have an email there.
Great.
So
thank you so much.
Creating
from the heart, the artistry of living. I'm Suzy Vance. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, Suzy.